Hey everybody, welcome back. My name is Blackjack, and today, after roughly a decade, we're going to get back to reviewing some Magic content due to a little bit of gaslighting by my personal friends. We are going to get started with Aetherdrift. As of today, I am recording this on the 27th of January, so about 50% of the set has released so far. I'm going to be giving you my ideas, my thoughts on the cards in the lens of Pioneer, Modern, Legacy, Commander. I'll be ignoring pretty much every other format. Um, I've been playing Magic since I believe 1999, 2000. It's been about 25 years. I used to create content intermittently for Magic, and I've had a little bit of a spark in uh, restarting that process. So let's start here with this video. So, I'm not going to do really any editing. I'm not going to do multiple takes. I'm not going to re-record this video. If I make a screw up, you're just going to get to witness it and do it right alongside with me. Let's get started. Gas Guzzler. 1 mana, Vampire Rogue. Obviously, Vampire is an important creature type. Start your engines. So, first thing I'm going to say about everything that has to do with starting your engines or having speed, these are the types of mechanics that right now probably are not going to be good just because there simply isn't enough cards in the pool that is Magic for them to really be effective or get used to their full potential. But it is definitely cards like this that at some point, once we get more love, once there's more max speed, once there's more speed based cards in the pool, it's cards like this that have good potential to go up in price. So if you like either vampires or rogues or its effect or the engine mechanic, this is something you're probably going to want to look at. And that will be true for essentially every engine based card going forward. Uh, Enters tap 2/1, and then for a black mana, you can sack another creature, vehicle, and draw a card. Again, eventually has the potential to be good. It's a vampire, so if you want to toss it in your Edgar Markov deck, it's a 1 mana 2/1, so at worst, it's still going to do all right. Transit Mage, I'm very excited about this card. Obviously, in the past, we've gotten a ton of love as far as these type of mages, whether it be Trinket, Treasure, God, I can't even remember the name of all of them. The 3 mana one that nobody plays or that gets CMC3. I like Transit Mage. I think it's better than most of these 3-drop wizards that search for artifacts. Trinket is probably always going to be number one because you can get a Soul Ring. Um, the one that finds 2 CMCs, I think, is also very good in decks like the Krark, the Thumbless, and things like that. You can go get Krark's Thumb. You can go get Isochron Scepter. There's a lot of combo potential for the one that gets 2 mana. As far as Transit, I think it's still super cool. As far as the way I judge cards, at least through the lens of Commander, is I'm cool with any cards that do searching as long as it is a limited or specific thing to search for. I'm not cool with people playing Demonic Tutor casually, but something like this I have a lot of respect for because obviously you've built your deck in such a way that you're looking to play a card like this to get something that's fun. For example, I play a Shorakai Commander deck, and my big win con is finding the Might Stone and the Weak Stone and Urza and creating the flip commander that's 2 cards. Once I've done that, I've won the game. And obviously, that not in a literal sense, but I've won by every metric. I've created Exodia, so to speak. So when I look at something like Transit Mage, I think immediately you go get super cool tools for your deck. You're playing a bounce deck, maybe you're going to go get Conjurer's Closet if you're playing Rune of the Fomori or something like that. I'm also thinking Panharmonicon. You can go get some doubling effects for ETBs. I think this card has great application in numerous commander decks. So any sort of full art, foil, rainbow foil, gives you a massage foil, ultra rare, secret rare, limited edition, one of one, signed by the artist, this card's probably going to be expensive. I would not throw this away with your draft bulk. I'm not even going to talk about this guy. Couldn't care less. We're just going to go down and kind of just talk about stuff that I'm interested in. Again, I'm looking through the lens of Pioneer, Modern, Legacy, though I don't think we're going to see much for Legacy, and then Commander. There are cards that I've noticed that are common and uncommon that will have applications in certain places, but right now I want to really just kind of talk about the spicy stuff. So the next card I have mentioned here, Renewed Solidarity. So you get to choose a creature type, and then at the beginning of your end step, for each token you control of the chosen type that entered this turn, create a token copy of it. I think any kind of a card that doubles the amount of tokens or doubles the amount of counters has application and is on a trajectory to be expensive at some point. When you think of decks like Psy, where you're looking to make a bunch of Thopters, obviously that's mono blue, but any sort of application where you're looking to make Thopters, you're looking to make Golems, any sort of token that you can double, this effect is going to be good. Obviously, they made this deck for the intention of zombies, and the disclaimer of this whole video is obviously if you have any plans to play or build zombies between now and when Aetherdrift releases, your best bet is probably to do it right now, as every zombie card, as we know, is going to spike, 10 to 20% just because there's so much zombie love in this set. So that is something I would keep an eye on. Prophet of the Scarab is a good example. Vigilance, 5 mana. When it enters, draw cards equal number of zombies you control or zombies in your graveyard. Obviously, the big problem when you're playing creature-based decks or tribal-based decks in Commander is normally you throw all your guys out there, one board wipe, and the game is over for you. And that's true with zombies, that's true with vampires, that's true with goblins and Krenko. We see that time and time again. A card like this, where you can still draw, let's imagine a world post board wipe in your zombie deck, and you have really nothing left in your hand, able to slam this, and it's not based on the amount of cards that you have in play, but you're drawing, 3 to 10 cards because of what's in your graveyard. I think this is going to be a slam dunk for any deck that's playing blue and is playing zombies going forward. On Wings of Gold, flying zombies. Obviously, that's an exciting thing. We've seen it before with different cards that have been able to give zombies flying. It's an enchantment that buffs them as well, and then when one or more cards leaves your graveyard, you make a zombie. I think this card's going to be pretty good. It's not going to be great. Obviously, when you look at 4-mana enchantments, you think of things like Smothering Tithe, and it's really hard comparatively to say this card is playable on that level. But for your zombie decks, for your low-powered casual tribal tables where you're just trying to have some fun, I think it's a cool thing. Lost Monarch of Ifnir. So it has Afflict 3, and other zombies you control have Afflict 3. Now remember, as we assess this card, Afflict is when it becomes damaged, when it becomes blocked, it will deal 3 damage to the opponent in terms of life loss. Obviously, Zombie's main win condition is gathering a horde, so to speak, and walking dead upon thy enemy. So having to have a mass of zombies that, even though they get blocked, they deal damage in terms of life loss, I think is going to be a pretty cool win condition for decks like this, and I think this card's going to be a staple. That's not even including the second part where if a player was dealt combat damage by a zombie, you get to mill and then return a card from your graveyard to your hand. Obviously, zombies is all about sacrificing in and out of the graveyard. This is something you're going to want for your deck. Accursed Dunyard. So we've seen a card like this before. I can't remember the name of it. I think it's the Swarm Yard, maybe. It's the one that revives like squirrels and stuff. But this can regenerate shades, skeletons, specters, spirits, vampires, wraiths, zombies. Let's get rid of all the BS in there, and let's look at spirits, vampires, and zombies. This card will be expensive. any type of full art or foil version of this card. I could see if it doesn't get reprinted to the ground in a couple years, a full art or a foil version of this is going to be $20 just based on spirits, vampires, and zombies. I think those creature types are very, very played, very, very popular. I think this has a lot of potential to be good. Explosive Getaway is something I wanted to talk about. So it's a sorcery. You exile an artifact or creature and return it at the next end step, and then it deals 4 damage to each creature. So this is kind of a controls deck way of getting out a threat and then being able to save it and simultaneously wipe the board from your enemy. I think it has potential to be good. I don't know what format. Maybe it's just standard playable, but cards like this always make me excited to think like it's Control's favorite thing to do. They put out one threat, they protect that threat, and then they deal with all your stuff, and this does both for them. Demonic Junker is one I'm kind of excited for. I've never been a big Affinity player. I've never played it in Modern. I never played it way back in the day when it originally was printed. But Demonic Junker, 7 mana, affinity for artifacts. When it enters, it destroys a creature target player controls for each player, mind you, obviously making it better in Commander. And then, if a creature was destroyed this way, put 2/1/1 counters on it. Putting counters on it is cool, and this could definitely be a big threat very quickly. The affinity for artifacts is obviously the most important thing on this. We look at other cards that have affinity for artifacts. You look at Null Drifter, the 7 mana cast this, draw 2, Annihilator 1. You look at tons of cards in the past, the 5 mana affinity for artifacts, draw 2. I don't know why it's not coming to my mind right now. But I think this card has pretty good potential. I don't know necessarily that artifact decks typically play black, especially the fast ones like Affinity. But I think you could fairly easily manage to add this color. You have access to lands that give you all colors if you have artifacts. You have access to Springleaf Drum. You have access to Mox Opal. I think this card has potential. I don't know how much, but it feels good to me. So we keep scrolling down. Looks like the next thing I wanted to talk about was, let's see, that was Demonic Junker. Okay. So I don't know how to pronounce this guy. I'm going to say Muyanlin, Wind Rider. Enters, makes a 3/2 vehicle with crew 1. Vehicles you control have flying. Whenever one or more creatures you control the flying deal combat damage to a player, draw a card. This card is good. Obviously, it has its home in commander decks that are interested in playing little flying creatures like Thopters. It also has a home in decks that are going to be playing strictly vehicles or a combination of both. I don't think it's going to be expensive. I don't think it's going to be format defining. But if you're playing anything with flying creatures or anything with vehicles and you have blue, this is definitely a card that you're going to want. I wasn't super... Okay, here we go. If I'm not talking about a card, it's because it really didn't get me super excited. And again, the start your engine mechanic, I can't stress this enough. I really don't know how to evaluate a new mechanic other than say, until we see more support and more cards printed involving this mechanic, there's not a great way to quantify it. But it is something that, as time goes on, it will get better no matter what. So always keep your eye on these mechanics. If you see cards that have start your engine or have speed that interest you, it's always better to get it early because realistically someday it'll be worthwhile. So Stridehander Automaton, 3 mana, Thopters get +1/+1. And then if one or more artifact tokens would be created or control, those tokens plus an additional Thopter are created instead. Again, any sort of artifact deck, I'm thinking Sai, I'm thinking Shorikai, I'm thinking anything that plays artifacts is going to be interested in this card. Most of these decks create Thopters. Um, Creating double that amount and having your Thopters actually become dangerous by turning them into 2/2s for 3 mana, I think is great. I think this is a card that I plan to pick up for my personal Shorikai list, and if you plan to play artifacts anytime soon, I would look into this as well. So, energy cards. So we're printing more energy cards these days. There's a little ASMR vaping for you. Don't start smoking if you haven't already, kids. Nissa, World Soul Speaker, 4 mana. Whenever land enters, you get 2 energy. You may pay 8 rather than the mana cost for permanents you cast. This card has the potential to be insane. I don't think there's quite enough energy cards that exist right now. We're getting close, and I think that day will come. I think anytime you have the landfall mechanic, you look years back and you look at cards like Lotus Cobra, where in the beginning people weren't so sure this card was going to be great, and then they realized, oh my god, this with fetch lands is actually generating me mana. This card is insane. I think of this card as well. If you have multiple land drops and you go fetch land, crack it, you're already at 8. So if you have this and an Oracle and Moldiah out per se, you have 2 fetch lands in your hand. You can cast anything in your hand for free. Obviously, the downside to a card like this is if you have that many lands, you're already just casting this stuff for its mana cost. So it kind of fights against itself to be really good, but still has good potential in my mind. Aetheric Amplifier, can't stress this enough. Anything that says double the number of each kind of counter on target permanent, double the number of each kind of counter you have, it's going to be good. It's going to be expensive. If you have anything that's interested in getting doubled in your decks, you should probably buy it early. Adaptive Omni Tool, I think this card's interesting for Commander. As far as equipment decks go, if you're playing roughly 20 equipment in your equipment deck, that means every 1 in 5 cards statistically is going to be an equipment, right? So when you attack, you get to look at the top 6 and reveal an artifact card and put it in your hand. That means on average, you're going to hit at least 1 every time you attack. And that's not even including the artifacts you're playing to ramp, like your Felwar Stone, your Arcane Signet, your Soul Ring, your lands that can also be artifacts. I think this card is great. I think this is going to slide into every equipment deck, or it should be, as the hit rate is essentially 100% statistically. I expect it to do well. Aetherflux Conduit, I know, is a card that people are going to be excited about. 6 mana. When you cast a spell, you get energy equal to the CMC. Pay 50 energy. Draw 7. You may cast any number of spells from your hand without paying their mana cost. Unfortunately, this is just worse Aetherflux Reservoir. Aetherflux is essentially Storm, so even if you're just, you have Mystic Forge out and you have Sensei's Divining Top out and you're just casting Sensei's over and over and then flipping it back on top, even though it only has 1 CMC to cast it, you're incrementally gaining +1 on the Aetherflux because of its, like, quote-unquote storm ability. So you're able to kill people much faster. Obviously, in that situation, it goes infinite. So yes, Aetherflux is still good there, but Aetherflux Conduit not only needs you to get up to 50 energy, which is difficult, but then you're going to draw 7 cards, and those cards might not be game winning, and this is more mana than Aetherflux Reservoir. So I'm not super impressed by this card. I don't think it's going to make any waves. I think if you really want an effect like this, you should probably just be playing Aetherflux Reservoir, plus that card is just cooler anyway, so nothing like holding people hostage in game, of course. Then we look at, let's see, a couple other cards I can mention. March of the World Ooze. Obviously, this thing's a trash can, but if you play oozes or you have any dream of playing oozes, get on there, buddy. Defend the Rider. Target permanent gains hexproof and indestructible, or you can make a pilot. This card's interesting, but with cards like Legolas's quick reflexes, I don't think anything's going to beat that anytime soon. As far as a low costing green spell that gives hexproof, indestructible, split second, it just saves your guy. I don't think this card's going to make waves. Mindspring Merfolk, 1 mana Merfolk. Always got to look at cards like this. Merfolk's been playable in Modern and Legacy for like 20 years in Legacy. So anytime you get a 1 or a 2 or a 3 mana Merfolk, we have to look through the lens of older formats and see, is it possible for this to be good? This one's definitely not. So X, 2 blue, tap it, draw X cards, put a 1/1 counter on each Merfolk you control. I don't see this card scene playing any format. It's just too slow in the older formats, and a 1 mana 1/1 is just not really going to do it in the world of Regavans and 1 mana Tarmogoyfs and, just the whole new world order that we're living in, unfortunately. Momentum Breaker. This card's interesting. It's another everyone sacrifices a creature. So this is, you have your Accursed Marauder. You have, I think, like 5 of these effects now between 2 and 3 mana that make everybody sack a creature. Notably, this is an enchantment, so this would be the only one that would not be uniform. So instead of you having to sacrifice something, if you don't have an enchantment or an artifact, or I'm sorry, or a vehicle or a creature, then you wouldn't have to sacrifice anything. In the decks that want to do this, that's not really an upside because the decks that like sacrificing things want this stuff in their graveyard to recur it anyway. So I'm not super impressed, but I could definitely see a world where this is at least playable. At the end of the day, you have to think, even in just any sort of a black-based control deck in Commander, this is just 2 mana. Each of your opponents sacrifices a creature or discards a card. And I think the value just at face for that is pretty darn good. So this is definitely something that you're probably going to want to have at least a couple copies of going into the future, as it is an uncommon that I see being, $5 2 years from now. Thopter Fabricator. 3 mana, whenever you draw your second card, create a 1/1 Thopter token with flying. More Shorikai love. If you're playing Shorikai, you're interested in playing Shorikai or any type of artifact-based deck like that, you're going to love a card like this. It's 3 mana. It doesn't die to a removal spell, or I'm sorry, it doesn't die to a board wipe because it is a vehicle, and it's giving you gradual card advantage in the form of Thopters. So I think this card is a slam dunk for anything that wants to make Thopters. Excuse me. Anything that wants to make Thopters, anything that wants to draw cards, this card's going to be good. Count on Luck, I think, is interesting. Exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. 3 red mana is fairly intensive, but if you look at cards in general, the red-black guy that makes treasures when you cast stuff from exile, things like that, this card's playable. This card's interesting. I don't think it's going to be expensive. I don't think it's going to be any sort of a 3 mana Rhystic Study, but I could see it being playable. Full Throttle, give yourself 1,000,000 combats. This is like the 1,000th card that does this. Not super exciting to me. Fearless Swashbuckler. Haste. Vehicles you control have haste when you attack. If a pirate and a vehicle attack this combat, draw 3 cards and discard 2 cards. If you're playing pirates, this will be pretty cool. If you're not, this won't be pretty cool. Samut. Another card with Start Your Engine. A lot of potential. First Strike, Vigilance, Haste, 4/5, Word Soup. Creatures get +X/+O. Non-creature spells cost X less. This card's cool. It's probably playable, though not very good right now in Commander. Again, 5 years from now, after we have another, 30 engine-based cards, this card will probably be pretty sweet. This is probably my pick for the best card that I've seen so far in playability in Eternal formats, Market Backwalker. This card is insane. This card does everything Hardened Scales wants. It's a combo engine in a lot of commander decks, just like Walking Ballista was. It lets you draw cards. I think in hardened scales in modern, this is the new quote unquote the one rain. So you lost your draw effect via the one rain. I think this is a very easy and clean replacement for that. I think this card's going to be really good. It's probably going to be a $20 card. I know they have a lot of special borders that are like yellow and all these crazy things coming out. This card's going to be expensive. If you want a copy, you may as well just pick one up. I don't see this thing dropping below $10 anytime soon. Ketchermos, the New Dawn, 3 mana 4/4, menace, indestructible, lifelink. Sounds amazing. Can't attack or block unless there are 7 more cards in exile. Okay, that's not super unreasonable these days. Whenever one or more cards are put into exile from graveyard and or the battlefield during your turn, you draw a card and lose the 1 life. I think this card has potential to be good. I do not think it has potential to be great. The one thing that holds it back is whenever one or more cards are put into exile. So every instance of you exiling cards allows you to draw once, but you can't do it multiple times to my understanding. So if you were to activate Necropotence hypothetically for 5 mana, or sorry, for 5 cards, then at your end step you would draw those 5 cards, and then obviously you have to exile down to 7. So then you get to exile, then you trigger this, and then all of a sudden you get to draw a card and lose a life. I think it's cool in that regard, but I don't think it's going to be game breaking. I think the more interesting way to play this is exile effects. You look at things like Oblivion Ring and Chain to the Rocks, cards like that, cards that incrementally get rid of creatures on the board but can still get you advantage using your commander. I think those are interesting, but obviously when you play too many cards like that, you open yourself up to a mass enchantment wipe, and you pretty much just lose the game in one go because you've spent the entire game Oblivion Ring exiling all of your problems, and then someone casts an austere command, and just everything you've known has now ended. So I think the card's good. I think as a commander, it's going to be fun. I don't think it's going to change the world. I akin this a lot to Anya Falconwrath, where it's a 3 mana commander that makes a lot of cards that are normally worthless, like a lot of older Madness cards, all of a sudden interesting and expensive and part of that engine. In the same vein, I think this card is going to do similar things to cards that exile, but I just like Anya Falconwrath, though good, is very niche and probably not long term impressive, I guess is the easy way to put it. So in the beginning, I think this will spike certain cards, but those cards will probably come back. Let's see here. I think my next note was on Sab Sunen, Luxa Embodied, 5 mana, green, blue. I think this card's cool. Reach, trample, indestructible. It has to have an even number of counters to attack or block. And then your first main phase, you put a 1/1 counter on it. If it has an odd number of counters, draw 2 cards. I think this card's good. I think it's interesting. I think you can build around it very easily. But I also think 5 mana blue green is probably bar none the most uh, busy intersection in terms of commander playable cards. Immediately comes to mind is you have like uh, Adrix and Niv, which is a doubler in the command zone for cheaper. Um, I'm not sure this is going to change the world, but if you're really interested in something like this, then obviously go for it. Agorex, this card is sweet. Trample, 8/8, 5 mana dinosaurs. Obviously, all of our dinosaur teammates rejoice. Everyone who's a part of the Jurassic Park fan base like me. This is it. Slam dunk that bad boy into your commander deck and have a great time playing another 8/8 monstrosity. Also has cycling, which is of note. And then when you cycle this, you actually get to give a creature trample and indestructible. I think this is going to be better than the average bear, average dinosaur in this case. Again, not going to rock the world that is Gishath, but definitely a integral piece that going forward, anytime someone builds a Gishath deck, this is going to be a card that they're going to have to get. So you might as well pick it up now. You may as well get a sweet full art one. I'm sure they're going to be cheap, and I'm sure they're going to be sweet. Quag Feast, I'm actually really excited about. The first thing I thought of with this card was Pioneer, Greasefane. 2 mana, choose a creature, planeswalker, or vehicle, mill 2, then destroy the permanent if its mana value is equal or less than the number of cards in your graveyard. I think any sort of self-mill is going to be interested in this card. I'm not positive it's playable in Modern. When you look at Red-Black Madness, like the discard decks that are going around right now, 2 mana seems expensive as you're casting Nethergoyfs and things like that. But definitely in Pioneer, I could see this playable in Greasefane or any sort of self-mill strategy. I think this has the chance, it has the spark, it has the drift to be good. Reprinting of Bloodghast is sweet. This art is disgusting though. But if you need your Bloodghast, go ahead and get it because they're going to be cheap now. Repurposing Bay. This is Birthing Pod for artifacts. If you did not know, Birthing Pod is an incredible card. Just recently unbanned in Modern, but was taken off the table for nearly a decade or so before that. Birthing Pod has been great ever since the beginning. Even when you look to older, competitive commander decks like Blood Pod, the whole idea was to build up the chain in one turn and kill everybody with a Kiki Jiki. I think Repurposing Bay is going to be incredible. I'm sure there's lines that let you untap and continue the chain over and over all the way up to a certain mark. I'm sure there's combo potential. Any artifact deck that plays blue is going to want this going forward. This is another card that tutors, but it's a specific tutor. It's not open-ended demonic tutor, get the best card in your deck. It's get the best 3 cost with your Arcane Signet in the deck, which is a lot cooler to me. This card is sweet. You may as well buy a couple. I think they're only going to go up in value over time. Hazaret Godseeker. 2 mana, 5/3 indestructible haste, start your engine, yada yada yada. Another card that I think this card has good potential, but until I see more engine mechanics, I'm not convinced. New printing of Chrome Mox. This thing's gonna be $1 million. If you play competitive Commander, keep it. Otherwise, sell this thing as soon as you open it. It's probably going to be at least 200 if I had to guess. Oil Deep Gearhulk, 4 mana, lifelink ward. When it enters, choose a card. Blah, blah. This card's trash. Firewood Gearhulk, trash. Valor's Flagship. I looked at this card for things like Greasefane, Flying, First Strike, Lifelink, 7/7. It's pretty good, but it's not going to be better than your current options. So, trash. Lord of the Undead, cool art, reprinting, it's going to be good. Pia Nalar and Saheeli, more cards that are interesting and playable. Build around me type commanders. We always get these with new sets. Obviously, they're catering to Commander these days more than anything. I don't think either of them are going to change the world, but I think they're both interesting if that's something you're into. Hashiton, Scarab's Fist, white, black. When you discard a creature card, you may pay 3, including 2 colors and a blue. If you do make a token of it, that's a 4/4 black zombie. I think this and Temet next to him, this guy, I think these two are much better than any other Esper option we've had for commanders thus far for zombies. I think this is the first time that we've had a good option to bring white into the mix, because up until now, it's always felt like Scarab God was far and away the best zombie you could choose if you're looking to build a deck like this, but now we can actually introduce white, and I think you'd be pretty happy to play either one of these as your commander. So again, if you're interested in zombies, it's probably better to get them now because the hype is only going to build and they're only going to get more expensive as we get closer to the release. Chandra number probably 23, I'm going to guess, this is the 23rd Chandra. Spark Hunter. At the beginning of combat on your turn, skip this card. Okay. So we have Captain Howler, Sea Scourge. Yep, I'm seeing nothing here. Nothing. Let's see. Crypt Caller Chariot. I did want to mention this card. 4 mana, when you discard one or more cards, create that many 2/2 zombies. Crew 2 for a 5/5. This is a card where we talked about at the beginning of the video. The worst part about playing any sort of thematic creature-based deck where you're playing, one type is the board wipes are just killer, and it makes it really hard to play the deck for a long period of time. Cards like this make these decks more playable. This card is quietly going to be pretty good in zombie decks because it doesn't die to a board wipe. It gets you over time renewable advantage for free, and then it also crews, so post board wipe you can still play a creature, crew it, and get in there. I think this card's going to be sweet. I think it's going to be playable 100%. More start your engine cards. I won't talk about those yet. Bulwark Ox. I don't know. I get a really weird feeling about Bulwark Ox. I think this guy is quietly gonna have an impact. I don't know if it's gonna be standard. I don't know if it's gonna be pioneer, but anytime you see a cheap creature that can sacrifice to save other creatures, it just feels like there's something there. It has the possibility. Obviously, creatures have to have counters on them, but I don't know. I'm pulling for the Ox. I think there's something to it. Boom Mobile. 4 mana. When it enters, you get 4 mana back to activate abilities, which means obviously you could activate the ability on it right away to have it deal X damage to any creature and put a 1/1 counter on this vehicle. I think anytime a card is free, even if it then restricts the mana that you get back, it's worth looking at. It's worth investigating. I'm sure there's something out there that makes this card insane. I haven't thought of it yet, but I'm sure someone will. So this is anytime you see a card that is essentially free, you should look at it and assess it through that lens. Caradora, Heart of Alakria, 4 mana, 4/2 human knight. Enters, search your library for a vehicle. I don't think we've gotten too many cards that can search for vehicles. Obviously, not including all of the artifact searching stuff, but just vehicles itself or mounts. It's cool. It's interesting. You could build it if you want. It doesn't blow my socks off, but it's fun. Let's see here. Loot the Pathfinder. 5 mana, double strike, vigilance, haste. You can activate these abilities with exhaust only once, so you can get 3 mana, you can draw 3 cards, you can deal 3 damage. Obviously, in these colors, it's very easy to bounce your commander. So there's a world where you could essentially just continually activate exhaust blue, draw 3 cards, and you basically just have an ancestral recall on your creature, and then you just bounce loot and do it again. He has a lot of potential to be good. Plus, he has vigilance, he has double strike, he has haste. He's going to be sweet. The Last Ride is our new version of -X, where X is your life total. So it's your new version of hurting yourself to get something that's good. I think the fact that it's a vehicle probably takes it out of the running compared to the other options right now. When you look at the other options, they're barely even playable in Modern anymore. They had their years and they were good, and I think this card isn't bad, but it's hard for me to look at this card and be super impressed There's niche applications where in those decks you could play it and it doesn't necessarily die to a board wipe, I guess. But I think there's better things you can be doing in those decks already. So, though awesome and art is top tier, one of the best arts in the set, in my opinion, I am not convinced this thing is going to go anywhere but down as far as price. So, the Aether Spark was the next card I had mentioned. This feels win more to me. I'm not super blown away. I'm not super impressed by it. I think, I don't know. I mean, you can attach it, you can draw some cards, you get to add counters, you get to add mana eventually. It just feels like for 4 mana, you could be doing a lot of other things. This is for sure not going to see play in traditional formats, but even in Commander, 4 mana for an equipment that draws a couple cards once, maybe twice, doesn't feel incredible when you could be playing, Sword of Feast and Famine or something like that. So the last card, sorry, there's 2 cards I wanted to talk about. The second to last one is the Muraganda Raceway. So, max speed, you get to add 2 colorless. Anytime you have a land that can add 2, it's worth looking at because traditionally those lands are broken in every format. They're playable in every format. This one feels very demanding because you have to have max speed. I don't think it's possible with the cards we've had released so far with this mechanic to achieve max speed on turn 2 or turn 1 without utilizing this card as well. I suppose there's a world where you could go this on turn 1 plus maybe an artifact. If they print like a 1 mana artifact that gains you speed, turn 2 play another one of these and another artifact, and then you're at max speed. But realistically, that's asking a lot, and it's also really kind of condensing your options as far as cards to play with. So this is a card, the quintessential idea that someday this card could be $40, and speed is a massively played mechanic in Legacy, in Modern, and Vintage. We have no idea. If you see copies of this for under like $5, if you can find them for like $2-3, full art, foil, whatever, I'll probably pick up a playset and just hold on to it for the long term because eventually any land that adds more than 1 will be broken. Finally, we have Bright Glass Gearhulk. 4 mana, green, green, white, white, first strike trample. When it enters, search your library for up to 2 artifacts, creatures, and or enchantments with mana value 1 or less. Reveal them. Then put them into your hand. So, this card's insane. Any sort of green deck, obviously green, green, white, white is very demanding of your colors and your mana that you have out. I could see this being played in a 3 mana deck, maybe blue, green, white, some sort of, again, Rune of the Fomori, some sort of bouncing or artifact based commander. I could see this being playable. I could also see this being playable in just a base green white shell. I would say going forward, any deck that's playing green and white is going to want this card. You notice that it says when it enters, you may search your library, so that means you can bounce it and you can use it multiple times. And then it's up to 2 artifacts, creatures, and or enchantments with mana value 1 or less. That doesn't mean total. So, as far as I understand, you can go get a Soul Rain and another 1 mana thing. Because you can go get up to 2 artifact, creatures, and or enchantments with mana value 1 or less. So you could go get an Esper Sentinel and a Soul Ring. You could go get a Mox Diamond and a Mother of Runes. I think this card's sweet. It has a ton of applications, and this is another card where if you're playing green and white, you're probably going to want this regardless of what your deck is doing, and will probably be valuable, at least in like sweet foil versions. That's all I got. I believe, again, this is coming out, or well, this is recorded on the 27th, hopefully coming out today. As far as I know, this is all that's come out for Aetherdrift so far. I'll do another review once the rest of the set is spoiled to let you know what I think. And then we will also possibly come back and assess the speed mechanic to see if they printed more cards that interact with it that make it good. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and as always, Godspeed.